From the House of the Temple in Washington, D.C., this is the Tyler's Place, brought to you by the Supreme Council of the Scottish Rite Southern Jurisdiction. I'm your host, Maynard Edwards, 32nd degree KCCH. Thank you for joining us. Podcast at scottishrite.org is the email address, as always. And don't forget, download all of those apps free in your app store right now, the Scottish Rite Journal app, and the Scottish Rite app, which is sort of like a Scottish Rite version of Facebook, where you can chat with brothers around the country, post photos. There's a calendar on there, so it's a lot of fun, free in your app store right now, so go ahead and check that out. Also, something really cool to tell you about. If you go to scottishrite.org right now and you log in at the members area, you have to have a membership portal account, so if you don't have one, you'll have to set it up. But if you log in there, you will be able to see your brand new, hot off the presses, I guess it's presses when it's the internet, but you will be able to see your digital membership ID card. Now, this is in addition to the hard copy that you're going to get in the mail or from your secretary once you pay your 2020 dues, but this is also available to you in place of or in addition to that hard copy dues card. And yes, the Supreme Council has authorized its use. So if you're traveling and you log on your phone and you present this digital ID card, you'll be able to access a visiting valley in the Southern Jurisdiction if you're a Southern Jurisdiction member. So let's say you're from Maryland, for instance, like I am, and you visit Key West, for instance, like I do. I can have my membership card right there on my phone. So check yours out right now today. And while you're there, check out auto renewal. It's something new from the Supreme Council also that will help you kind of stay on top of managing your Scottish Rite membership and also make sure that you don't get hit with that end of year dues crunch, because every Masonic organization hits you at the end of the year for those dues. Here in the Scottish Rite Southern Jurisdiction, we made it a little bit easier. It's going to happen in August, and it's an auto renewal, so it's kind of a set it and forget it, as Ron Popeil always says. So check those things out right now. Go to scottishrite.org, and if you got questions, you need more information, glad to help. Podcast at scottishrite.org, again, is the email address. Had a wonderful, wonderful opportunity to sit down with our illustrious new Lieutenant Grand Commander, Brother Mike Smith. He's the SGIG in South Carolina. He's a very recent past Grand Master and just a heck of a guy. And here as we enter into the autumn and this season of change, I thought it would be a good time to sit down and chat with him, and he gave me a ton of time. So I'm going to play you a short excerpt of that interview and then tell you how you can listen to the entire interview in just a little while. So here's illustrious Brother Mike Smith sitting down with the Tyler's Place podcast. So when you're in that council room and then they read the election and your name comes back, excited? A weight hit you? What was the reaction?
Well, first and foremost, humbled by that peer group to say, we have confidence in you in this role. Support role for all the members in that council room, but more especially for the craft that are in our valleys and in the orients around the jurisdiction.
Well, let's start at the beginning. I know, like myself, not a lot of folks have had the opportunity to sit down and talk with you. Tell us a little bit about Mr. Mike Smith, where you come from. I know South Carolina. I can hear it in your voice. And so tell us a little bit about your journey from boyhood on into Masonry, on into LGC.
Well, we can really turn that accent on if you want us to, Maynard, but bless your heart, son. No, I was born in a little small town called Landrum in the upper portion of the state, and grew up there, small town, great family values, great place to grow up. And as a matter of fact, my wife and I selected a home not far from there to raise our kids. So we're, a few miles south of that, but in the same general vicinity. I would say that Masonry came to me through my grandfather. He was very active. He worked in a textile mill, had a side job of being a shoe cobbler, so modest means, family. But ever so often I would see him as a young boy dressed in a tuxedo and my grandmother in a full formal gown and going to shrine events. He was exceedingly proud to be a Mason. And later years, my father became a Mason only a few years before I did, but he became the personal rep in the Spartanburg Valley, not too far away from the time that I became a very active member. But through family, friends, that's how I got involved with Masonry and particularly the Scottish Rite. I would say that one of the things that impressed me from my hometown is the lodge was in town, and I would walk by that little lodge room, which is still my membership's there today. And it was that little lodge room that you went by on the way to buy bubble gum and baseball cards, those kind of things in the 60s and the early 70s, I guess. And I got to know some of the men in town that were part of the Masonic fraternity. And I knew what it meant to my grandfather, so that's what made me pursue it at age 21.
Wow, so right minute you were legal, you went to the lodge.
Yep, I just finished my 40th year in Masonry in South Carolina in September. Went in September of 79. So it's been a fast 40 years. I got involved in Scottish Rite early on, really liked the philanthropy and the fact that there was a lot of activity for younger guys. And at the time I joined in early 82, I believe I might have been the youngest guy by far and away in the building. So I spent a lot of time doing stage crew work and doing ritual work, and all that was very appealing to me. It appealed to my sense that there's more to the story in Masonry than I received in the Blue Lodge, which still very active. I'm a chaplain in my lodge today. But Scottish Rite gave me that deeper understanding and a larger answer to the questions that I had about the esoteric nature and what does it mean. And a lot of that came from my early upbringing with a mother who was very devout and take us to church and make sure we understood and read and studied a lot over the course of my youth. So it was answering questions and giving me more insight into what I had seen and asked questions about previous.
So what did you do and I know you're not retired, you're still working, so you're juggling a lot of different things. So what do you do for a living? Tell us a little bit about your career, where you and how those skills influence the Scottish Rite work you do.
Yeah. I had the great pleasure to go to work for a privately held company called Milliken, and Milliken is a one family-owned private textile and chemical company in South Carolina. So
it's a rare thing.
It is, and it's been, I think we're now talking about the sixth generation of family members that still retain that ownership. So a global company, had a lot of great exposure to high values and integrity in business. It's hard to imagine with what we read and see sometimes today, but the values instilled in working for a company that was very highly motivated toward innovation, research, and integrity in what you do in business had a big influence. So through that, I was hired as an intern, working with some chemicals that were sugar derivatives that we were trying to do, Food and Drug Administration and or testing to make sure that it would meet food-grade additive systems. That's how I got started, and from there I got to help develop a couple product lines, and now I'm a global sales manager for a consumer product line that the company has. We only have a couple items that are consumer-based, and so that gives me a chance to interact with a lot of the big national retail chains, Amazon, other things. So it's been an exciting and interesting venture to go through, use my scientific background and education, and take that into a technical marketing and sales approach.
When we talk about more latent masonry, and I think that means something different to everybody. And I can see how in the role that you're talking about there, not only would the Masonic Study help that along by just teaching you how to get along with different kinds of people, the lessons you're learning at your job, you can then bring into Masonry.
And I think you're right about that. I mean, we learn from our path and the different influences we have. So having worked with a company who really values integrity, hard work, and a value system that's built around solving problems was fun. And it also gave me the opportunity to meet with CEOs and presidents in the daytime and general staff and training opportunities with people throughout the country and, in fact, parts of the world. So it's given me a chance to be in front of people and with people and listen more intently, I think, because that's part of what the training was all about, is to understand what the role is. That's
really exciting. That's really interesting stuff. Now, I know that you're a past Grand Master, so and not all that long ago, correct? It was a couple years ago. So you were an SGIG for some time at that point, and then you become the past Grand Master. Talk about juggling a couple of big hats. That's tell me a little bit about that journey as a Blue Lodge Mason to become Grand Master.
Well, that's an interesting question. I was asked at a very young age in 2002 to consider becoming the deputy in South Carolina. at a very young age. I think I was 43 at the time. Jim Cole and I came in at the same time. I'm about 6 weeks younger than he is. So
I'm 43 now. If they asked me to be the deputy to anything, I'd half pass out.
Well, it was right interesting. I'll tell the story. I walked in here for an interview with Grand Commander Kleinkeneck, and I walked across the vestibule into his office, and he says, "Oh my gosh, you're awfully young." And I said, "I know that might be an issue," but we sat together and we came away from that interview, and I was humbled to be offered that opportunity, more especially because it gave us a chance to travel and be with the craft. And what led to, I'd served in Grand Lodge committees and done the district deputies thing and Masonic education roles, finance, all kinds of different things, but I'd never really considered offering in South Carolina. You offer to serve as a junior Grand Warden, and that becomes part of a progressive line. Okay. And it takes you 8 years to complete that. But I had so many members that came to me and asked me would I consider offering. They liked some of the things we were doing in the Scottish Rite. They liked the fact that we were listening and trying things that were engaging members. And so I think that's what ultimately got me to agree to offer to do that. I was very fortunate to serve with some fantastic men and learn from some great grandmasters that we had. I finished my term in April of 19, so just recently. But it was a wonderful experience. Some days you were juggling the balls pretty heavily, but thankfully, I've got a great group of leaders in South Carolina in my 6 valleys that understood and took their responsibilities and did a great job during that term. So my visitation to valleys dropped a little, but we still were engaged. I tend to visit my valleys 4 to 6 times a year and try to be at all the reunions. And I know every SGIG and deputy has a plan based on their geography. Fortunately, South Carolina's geography allowed me to do that and tie the two together.
That's illustrious brother Mike Smith. He is the SGIG in South Carolina, and importantly, our brand new Lieutenant Grand Commander here in the southern jurisdiction of the Scottish Rite. And it was just a wonderful, wonderful chat I had with him, and he gave me so much time, and I want to share that with you because it was really great getting to know him, what his ideas are, what his thoughts are, and just getting to know him as a brother, and I want to share that with you. So keep an ear on the podcast feed over the next couple of days, and we will release that interview unedited in its entirety, and I'm glad to be able to bring that to you and share with you getting to know this wonderful guy who is one of our great Scottish Rite leaders. Switching gears just a little bit here on the Tyler's Place podcast, brought to you by the Supreme Council of the Scottish Rite Southern Jurisdiction. I got to talk about my favorite TV show and yours, Lodge 49 on AMC. Now, if you've not watched it, Lodge 49 is a TV show all about a fictional fraternity called the Order of the Lynx. And this show is based loosely on a lot of different fraternal organizations, but certainly there's a wink and a nudge to Freemasonry and Scottish Rite Freemasonry in particular. And I've chatted several times with the 2 guys in charge of the show, Peter Ocko and Jim Gavin. They're great guys, and they really have a respect and a love for fraternal organizations like Freemasonry, like the Scottish Rite. So the show is not poking fun at, but having fun along with fraternities and Masonic fraternities in particular. So I got a chance to chat with them about season 2, which just wrapped up the other day. It's available now on the AMC app, so I do tell you should watch it because it is a lot of fun. But from Lodge 49, showrunners and producers, Peter Ocko and Jim Gavin. Guys, thanks for joining us here in the Tyler's Place podcast. As we get into season 2 of Lodge 49, it seems like everyone is on a quest, so to speak. They're all looking for something in this period of disarray.
Yeah, I think this season, there's the Lodge is kind of falling apart a bit under Scott's rule. Maybe the rightful king is not on the throne. And so everyone's trying to find some answer to fix what right now feels like a world that doesn't seem quite right. And Scott himself is kind of involved with that. So, yeah, the Dud's overall quest is trying to keep the Lodge together, and he really feels like finding these scrolls is the answer. And he's, as we've seen so far, he's kind of been frustrated in that attempt, but I think there's more waiting for him.
You mentioned Scott, who is kind of in charge of the lodge right now. He's got this very well-meaning effort to bring lodge unity, but he decides that a memorial service is the way to go to sort of lift morale. And I have to tell you, this is one of those things that really does happen in fraternal organizations, where somebody will say, in very well-meaning effort, say, hey guys, I know what's going to bring everybody together. Let's have a special funeral or memorial service. And it's just not a cheery thing. Yeah,
that makes us very happy to hear, truly. I'd say one kind of guiding principle for this year is, we draw from a lot of sources. One, this year I think there's a heavy influence of Don Quixote. I love that book and all its different expressions through the centuries, from musicals. And so that's an important part of our story, and I do think it's a part of kind of lodges in general. They are, in the best way, I think, quixotic, and that they are trying to elevate the best of humanity, especially in an era where that's an increasingly difficult thing to do. So I think in our world, Dud and Ernie, and Dud especially, he is definitely on a quixotic quest to have the lodge live up to its own ideals. And I think that does push a lot of the story.
Well, he's the one guy who does believe in the impossible dream, and we won't tell you how it ends, but the fool is not often wrong.
I've noticed that there is a distinct lack of technology on the show. None of the characters really rely on their cell phones. Very rarely do we see a computer. Is that a conscious creative decision?
It's absolutely conscious. I think for us, seeing a cell phone in the lodge is like seeing the edge of the set or seeing a microphone drop down into frame. There's something about it that breaks the reality of the lodge. And I think we decided very early on that certainly within the walls of the lodge, but even within the world, we didn't want to feel that kind of present day technological connection, so-called, kind of interfering with these people just being together. And it's more part of the vibe than it is a device. But I think it is very important to us to portray a world that just doesn't rely on that.
Yeah, and I think so much of this idea of the links and their kind of mythology has to do with vision and seeing things. And, I'm as guilty of this as anyone. When you're looking at your cell phone, you're not seeing in the world. You're seeing it through a device or through social media. And at least in the space of our show, we want to give people like an hour where they can kind of remember what it's like to see the world and see other people. It's terrifying just driving on the freeway and seeing how many people are actually just looking at their phones. Yeah, it is very much a conscious choice to let people look up from their phones.
We're not trying to portray an Amish world, but I think for us, I don't know, I know for Jim and myself, there's a nostalgia. There's really a strong nostalgia for that place, and it's not necessarily a specific time. We're not saying, it's the 80s, the 90s, the 70s. We're just saying a time when there were fewer screens in our lives. And I think it's for us a pleasure to go back to that.
Yeah, I think it's part of just wanting to create a timeless story. Like this is a fable. It is a mythic kind of world. It's set in a relatable contemporary reality. But we don't make too many pop culture references, because those date very easily. Our references are kind of contained within our own world in a way, and that's all part of trying to keep, kind of just keep that timeless feeling.
We have to talk about the music on the show. Your soundtrack is extraordinary. It's very California, dreamy, alt-pop type of music. Really, really paints that dreamy picture that you guys are going for. Very colorful and very out there. Tell us about that process of creating the soundtrack.
It's a big deal for us. I mean, I've always loved a certain type of kind of dreamy, hazy, psych garage sound that I kind of associate with Southern California. And I have, a lot of my favorite bands. We've tried to find a place for the show, but the key is our music supervisor, Tom Patterson, who is, he's a journalist who just has a magisterial command of like 20th century music, and he just finds the craziest stuff you could ever think of, and he finds it in crazy ways. He finds it, 7 inches or 45s and old dustbins and thrift stores, and so that is a big part of the show for sure, and shaping a sound that is, fits the mood of our world and elevates moments. That's as much fun as we have, like kind of working on it. And, we love using, kind of these weird old bands that, maybe no one's heard of, but that they might get a moment in the sun is really exciting to us.
Yeah, and I promise you, for every song you hear that airs on the show, Tom has found between 5 and 30 others equally interesting. And, as Jim said, for us, one of our favorite moments in making the show is to look at a cut and put a song behind a scene or a moment and feel it lift it. And it's always magical, and we never can predict what's going to work until we actually put it to picture.
I have to tell you guys, I was really excited when I saw Bronson Pinchot show up in the show. He was one of the biggest sitcom stars of the late 80s, of course, from Perfect Strangers. He played Balky Bartokomous from Mypos, and just a great show, great actor. And I love seeing that guy on screen. What was it like to have Balky Bartokomous on the set?
He's a lunatic and a wonderful guy, so it's crazy to work with him. I mean, he brings, he's not obviously a lunatic, but he brings a crazy energy. He'll try anything. He nailed the audition. I mean, I didn't expect to see him show up in an audition for us. I don't think Jim or I instantly recognized him either. He looked different, and we just felt that the performance he gave, he was so perfect for the show. We cast him right away, but he fought for that role like anybody else and won it, heads and shoulders above the rest.
Fans of Lodge 49 are kind of a little bit of like a lodge unto themselves. There's a great community developing and a Facebook group that I'm a part of. And people really love to get on and discuss the show and talk about the characters. As the creators of the show, talk about that fan reaction, what it means to you guys.
When we started this, that certainly was part of, I think, our dream, was that other people would talk about, would want to discuss what happened on the episode and kind of pass back and forth theories on hidden things and make connections, because for us that is so part of our creative process, is to put all that out there. The thought that it wasn't going to get discussed, I think, was terrifying to us. So I think this season, in fact, this moment now is where we're finally starting to feel the tipping point hit, where people are seeking other people out to talk about it, which I can't tell you how much joy that gives us.
Yeah, and I try and I'll dip into that stuff here and there, but the thing when I talk to people about the show who have found it and enjoy it, it's really funny because everyone seems to find something different in it that they really latch onto. For some people, it is kind of the more mysterious elements and the secret society. Other people just kind of like love hanging out with Dud, and so our goal creatively is to just create that, rich of a world where you can enjoy an episode where not a lot happens in a certain way and just be with our characters as they go through life, but then kind of get the rug pulled out from under you in a fun way and gets, thrown down the rabbit hole. And I think from what I can gather, our fans are game for both, and that makes us very happy.
Season 1 of Lodge 49, AMC released it to people who were on the app. They released it all at once, kind of like the Netflix model. You got every episode all in one big swoop. This season, it's being done in a more traditional weekly release. So tell me which one you guys prefer, what your thoughts are about the big content dump of the whole show at once versus the one show a week model.
It's funny. It's a trade-off. I think you may be right that making somebody wait for it and then discuss it when it comes on, obviously, like that's in big plot-heavy shows, that's their bread and butter. But I think with ours, we're torn because the beauty of being able to drop all 10 last season was, well, first of all, the critics could see we did land the airplane. Like we knew where we were going. Because the show, as you begin to watch it, you wonder, like, what the hell is this?
You mean like that 6 years of my life that I gave up for the TV show Lost that never came to fruition?
It might have come up in our room that we didn't want to do things we didn't know where they were going. But I will say, the plus for us, if nothing else, I think the show is so much better enjoyed when you can watch it without commercials. So to pay the price, and sometimes the streaming services still make you watch them, but so it's a trade-off. You may be absolutely right that putting it on live and forcing that conversation to have after each episode, that may be really great for the show. Jim and I are still trying to figure it out.
I got to tell you, I really like the weekly release a little bit better because it gives you a little gap time between episodes, so you can do things like get on Facebook and talk about it with your friends, or go to work and say, hey, did you see Lodge 49 last night? And you're not going to have to worry about the spoiler thing where somebody has seen every episode. And I grew up in that era of you had to be home on Thursday nights to watch The Cosby Show, to watch Cheers. You couldn't miss it, or you'd be kind of out of the loop the next day. So I really think that there's a benefit to stretching it out just a little bit.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I missed that era of TV. I definitely am right there with you. And, like Lost for me was like the last big kind of network show where everyone I knew was watching it and waiting for it every week, and I miss that in my soul, and so any version where we can kind of duplicate that a little bit, I kind of like, it's just a different time right now, and all the networks are trying to figure out how to do all this with streaming and everything. So, but I do agree. I think there's something pure and more fun of like not knowing and waiting. I think
having to wait is a very Lodge thing anyway.
Absolutely. Lodge 49 on AMC, Season 2 just wrapped up. And please, if you have not watched it, go ahead and watch it. It's available on the AMC app, which you can download now and check out. It's such a fun show, and there is a great Facebook community, so check that out. Peter and Jim, thank you as always for joining us here on the Tyler's Place podcast. From the House of the Temple in Washington, D.C., this is the Tyler's Place podcast. Joining us now, illustrious brother Arturo de Hoyos, 33rd degree Grand Cross, our Grand Archivist, Grand Historian for Tyler's Trivia. Brother Art, let's recap last month's question. What other Masonic organization did Frederick the Great not start, but what did he protect? And the answer?
Well, it could be looked at it two different ways. Although he's the traditional founder of the Scottish Rite, and I say traditional because I don't believe that's a historical fact. But he was the founder, really, of the Grand Lodge of the Three World Globes in 1740. But he also issued a special order of protection for the Große Landesloge, which is the Grand Land Lodge or Grand National Lodge of German Freemasons. And this is an organization that practices what's known as the Zinzendorf Rite, which is a version of the Swedish Rite. But he issued that special order of protection. At this time, you have to remember that there were laws against secret societies, so-called. And so, since he was Frederick the Great, he had the authority to go ahead and put a little bit of mercy out there for his brother Freemasons.
Anytime you add the Great after your name, you get a little extra something when you show up at the old lodge door.
Oh, absolutely. So that the fact that he was King of Prussia might have helped.
A little. So if we did have some answers on that, and let's get on to a question for the month of October 2019.
Why is it better to own the one-volume edition of Mackey's Encyclopedia rather than the expanded 2 or 3-volume editions?
Well, now that is a question that requires a little thought. I love that question. If you think you know the answer, send us an email, podcast@scottishrite.org, or you can find us on the Scottish Rite app free in your app store, and send either one will count. And if we get a bunch of correct answers in just before the next show, we will draw one out. So don't worry if you're a little late getting to it, as Art always says.
Yeah, don't worry about when you send it in, brothers, because we don't select the winners until just before the podcast, so everybody really has an equal chance of winning.
That is going to wrap it up for the Tyler's Place podcast. I'm your host, Maynard Edwards, 32nd degree KCCH. As always, email us, podcast@scottishrite.org. We're always looking for stories, always looking for input. We want to know what you want to hear on the podcast. So send us those questions, those queries, your ideas. We want to hear them. In the meantime, I'll catch you guys next time right here on the Tyler's Place.
If you're interested in becoming a Freemason or in joining the Scottish Rite, email us at podcast@scottishrite.org.